Earlier, Boyd spoke about the stigma of obesity and addressing weight bias, and Louise also spoke about weight bias. And in preparing this presentation, it didn't take me very long at all to come across a stereotype that relates to weight bias. But the reality, of course, is very different to this, because obesity doesn't preclude most jobs, but there are situations where conditions that are associated with obesity can have dire consequences. And so we have this in this slide, the proverbial train wreck. This is a crash that occurred in the States in 2011 between a coal train and a maintenance train. And the cause was found to be fatigue related to the crew's schedule, but also undiagnosed sleep apnea. And both of the crew had sleep apnea, which wasn't known at the time of the accident, but which could have been diagnosed and treated, and potentially this crash could have been prevented had their BMI and other risk factors been used as trigger points to request a sleep study and then treat their sleep apnea. And just in case you think it's a one-off, here's another one in 2013 where 4 people were killed. Again, undiagnosed sleep apnea, and could have been prevented had physiological risk factors been used to trigger a sleep study. And another one again where this time the road bridge was taken out and 2 cars were involved in this crash as well, and 5 of the occupants of those vehicles injured. And again, could have been prevented. So let's just have a look at what the prevalence of obesity is in the workforce. This is data from the ABS, and you can see that in 2004-05, 54% of the employed population were overweight or obese, and that increased over the years through to 2011-12 to 62%. The prevalence is a lot less than the unemployed, and that's partly because the unemployed includes a fairly large proportion of younger people. But if you look at the figures of people who aren't in the labour force, it's similar to or just slightly more than the employed population. And we're not seeing here the healthy worker effect that you usually see in workers. Usually the prevalence of medical conditions is less in the workforce, but in the case of obesity, we don't see that. Some occupations have higher prevalence of obesity. So from the ABS data from 2004-05, production and transport workers had the highest prevalence. In 2007-08, machine operators, drivers. So again, this is transport workers had this highest prevalence. And we looked at this in New South Wales Rail in 2004 and again in 2009. And in that 5-year period, the prevalence of obesity in our train drivers increased from 40 to 47%. It also increased in the recruits. So the recruits mirror that's the population from whom we are selecting people to come and work, and the prevalence there also increased. So it's a population problem, but it's an occupational problem as well. So why might the prevalence of obesity be increasing in our workforce? There's a whole range of reasons, and over the years, fewer and fewer people have been working in primary industries where they spend all day labouring, and also other industries which historically would have been physically demanding are becoming less and less so because of increased automation, because of labour-saving technologies, and more workers are spending their time these days sitting down. I saw some data from the 60s which said that at that time about 50% of workers were very physically active during the day, and that's decreased now to somewhere between 20 and 30%. Also increasing are the hours of work, and there is a relationship between hours worked and obesity. So this is data from the ABS, and you can see that in 2004-05, people who worked, or I should say people, men who worked less than 24 hours a week had 48% prevalence of overweight or obesity, but men who worked 49 hours a week or more had a 70% prevalence. and that has increased to 75% more recently. But this isn't seen in females, so the prevalence of overweight and obesity in females was around about 50%, regardless of the hours worked. And when studies have looked at this, they've found the same relationship. So a positive association between long hours of work and weight gain and obesity, and particularly amongst men. So if you're working more hours and your job involves sitting down, then you're going to be spending more of your day sitting down. So there's a possible reason why hours of work could be related to obesity. It also means less personal time for exercise. It means you could well be missing dinner time at home and snacking on high-calorie foods. There's also a relationship between hours of work and reduced fruit and vegetable intake, so substituting a healthier dinner at home with higher calorie foods at work that might be bought and take away. There's also a relationship between increased alcohol intake and reduced sleep. So all of these factors are at play. And in terms of sitting at work, well, you can see there data from the ABS. Men who sit at work have the highest prevalence of overweight and obesity, but that's not the case for females. Interestingly, the highest prevalence is in labouring. Looking at some other workplace indices, and starting with workers' compensation, this review of the literature in 2006 said that there was that workers who are obese have more injuries and higher healthcare costs. But another review in 2007, whilst finding that some studies did show this, said that overall there was insufficient evidence and recommended that other studies be done with greater power. After this, there was this study in the US, which was from the Duke University, workers and healthcare workers, over 11,000 people, and it showed quite a clear relationship between obesity and workers' compensation claims, between lost work days due to workplace injuries, and also with claims costs. And this study, more recently, which controlled for various confounders, found an elevated odds ratio. So there does seem to be some relationship there. And what might be some possible reasons for that? Well, there could be increased risks of slips, trips and falls related to problems with gait, or due to fatigue that might be due to conditions associated with obesity, such as sleep apnea, or could be due to fatigue from people who are in perhaps very physically demanding roles and perhaps tire more easily. Could be related to poor ergonomics, could be due to medications being taken for conditions that are associated with obesity, back pain, for example. Or it could be due to other medical conditions that are associated with obesity that are then exacerbated in the workplace. Looking at exiting from employment, there was this meta-analysis in 2013 that found an increased likelihood of being medically retired and ending up on the disability pension if you were overweight, but particularly if you're obese. And there's also data and studies that have looked at absenteeism and obesity. So the National Health Survey, all the way back in 2001, reported that obesity was associated with 4 million days lost from the Australian workplace at that time, and that employees with obesity were 17% more likely to be absent from work because of personal injury or illness. And the ABS reported that when there was an absence, the duration was slightly longer in people who are obese. And studies that have looked at this have confirmed that this relationship exists. So this review from 2008 found that people with obesity miss more work days due to short-term absences, and particularly because of long-term disability and illness. This further systematic review, also from 2008, showed the same thing, a clear trend towards greater sick leave amongst the obese. Interestingly, there was some differences in the duration between US and European studies. And this review in 2009 also confirmed the same relationship, particularly for long-term sick leave. So what might be some workplace considerations for people who are obese? What might be some effects on inherent job requirements or in other work-related activities? So certainly there's equipment in the workplace that might have a weight capacity. There's personal protective equipment that people might need to use that isn't available in the correct size, or that might not be fitted correctly and might be worn less often or less or have less protective effect because it doesn't fit properly. Could be issues with workers that need to access particularly confined and narrow spaces, work that's very physically demanding, particularly work that involves climbing electrical workers, for example, who have to climb power poles or climbing stacks in factories to great heights to clean filters or check monitoring equipment. And even in work that isn't physically demanding, if someone is very obese and also has very limited mobility, there might be a need to develop an evacuation plan for that person if they're in a building with an elevator. Equipment in the workplace, well, here's a ladder that has a weight limit of 130 kilos, so clearly not suitable for weights above that. Ladders, of course, they're not particularly safe and shouldn't be used for any sort of long-term work. So if you look around in the workplace, you can often find other solutions, such as here's a step ladder with a greater weight limit. You can have access platforms that can be safe to use for long periods of work, mobile scaffolding, and you can have hydraulically operated equipment that can be moved around workshops and can be raised or lowered to different heights depending on the task that needs to be performed. There's also medical standards, but generally medical standards don't have a limit as such on weight. Where medical standards refer to BMI, it tends to be because of a need to investigate for other conditions that could affect safety. So in airline pilots, for example, the BMI is used as a trigger to further assess the presence or absence of diabetes and sleep apnea. And where the BMI is greater than 40, there's also a cardiovascular assessment done and an operational check, which is a test of the pilot's ability to access all controls and exit the aircraft quickly in the event of an emergency. In rail, we use the BMI for our safety critical workers to order a sleep study to check for undiagnosed sleep apnea. In the road industry, there isn't that same standard, but in the preamble to the sleep section, there is reference to not relying solely on subjective measures such as the Epworth and using factors such as these to investigate for undiagnosed sleep apnea, which might be associated with obesity. Finally, in the last few minutes, I'd just like to talk about some interventions that might be used to manage obesity at work. The workplace is a logical place to have programs to manage obesity because adults spend about a third of their waking hours at work and consume quite a substantial proportion of their calories at work. Work sites have access to the majority of adults, and the work sites have got communication channels that can be used to promote such programs, and also some workplaces might have canteens and vending machines where changes can be made to try and improve people's diets. The CDC in 2005 reviewed the literature and recommended that programs for the workplace should target both nutrition and physical activity together to maximise effectiveness. And studies of workplace interventions have confirmed that it's best when activities are combined, and that's where you get effects. Effects do tend to be modest because, of course, when you're running a workplace program, you'll have some people who participate and get a great response. You'll get some people who participate and get a little response, and then you'll get a large group of people who don't participate. So what you want to do when you're running a workplace program is maximise your chances of effectiveness by not only having multiple dimensions to your program, but asking the employees before you organise your program, what do you want, what will you derive most benefit from, have incentives, prizes for people that meet their own personal goals, include spouses and families, because by including families you maximise the chances that lifestyle changes that are achieved in the programs will be sustained long term. And things like health coaching also help, as does leadership support. It's crucial that the senior leaders in an organisation participate and lead by example, and using the communication channels, because if you don't promote your program, then you can have the best program in the world, but if people don't know about it, they won't participate and derive benefit from it. So thanks very much.
Thank you.